Hello, everyone. Welcome to another virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy. I'm Nick, the Director of Events and Digital Marketer for the store. Tonight, we are here for a wonderful debut novel, Only a Monster. Yay! Vanessa, happy book birthday.
Thank you.
So, of course, we have authors Vanessa Len and Naomi Novik. Vanessa is an educational editor. She has worked on everything from language learning programs to STEM resources to professional learning for teachers. And like I mentioned, this is her debut novel. Naomi, well, I don't really think I need to really explain her, but just in case, she is the New York Times best-selling author of more than a dozen novels, including Uprooted and Spinning Silver, A Deadly Education, and her most recent, The Last Graduate. I believe Vanessa wanted to go ahead and say something.
Yes, so in Australia, we often do an acknowledgement of country for special events. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where I am right now, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I guess I'd really love to thank Mysterious Galaxy. Thank you, Nick, for helping to organise all of this. I'm so excited to be launching my book. Thank you to Harper-Teen. Thank you to Lauren for helping to organise it, my amazing editor, Kristen, her assistant, Claire, my amazing agent, Tracy. And I would just love to especially thank Naomi for hosting. I feel like this is such a full circle for me because you were the first person I ever knew who published a book. And I really remember walking into a bookshop one day, seeing His Majesty's Dragon, I think it was called Temeraire here, and just being like, I know someone who wrote a book. I know who wrote this book.
Yes, I remember like harassing you for many years. Being like, all right, when are you going to? Yes, and finally, I'm so excited.
I really feel like that was my first step, though, just knowing someone else who published a book. So happy to be here with you.
Thank you. No, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy for Only a Monster, which I have gotten to read. I've in a few different versions, and I've like really, I love the final version, and so I feel like we're gonna have a great time talking about this. Everybody, just if you haven't noticed yet, there's a little ask a question link down at the bottom, so please throw questions in there, and I'm gonna be pulling out of that, assuming that Vanessa and I leave any time whatsoever. But we'll try. We'll do our best.
That is very fair. And if you haven't yet already, everyone, if you would like to get your copy of Only a Monster through Mysterious Galaxy, you'll notice also down below there's a link that says Buy Only a Monster and get a signed book plate, because Vanessa is wonderful and sending us from Australia signed book plates for her book. They haven't yet arrived, so when we do, make sure to get your book. Just be aware we'll probably have to send your book plate separately, but we'll definitely do that when they arrive. I'm going to disappear. Oh, I love all this love that you're getting in the chat, Vanessa. Yay! I'm going to disappear because I'm taking up enough time. I want to leave room for this book and for Vanessa, because this is her, as you're all saying, her North America book release. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. I'll see you all at the end.
Thank you, Nick.
Yay. All right. So I'm going to just, dive into some of my favorite things about the book. Okay. Right. And, but, if you, give us your elevator pitch for the book for any people who have not yet devoured this, or, for some reason have not yet clicked the link to buy the book, which you should do right now. But yeah, give us a pitch.
So I'm pitching it as a monster girl named Joan, whose summer is absolutely ruined when the cute guy at work turns out to be a monster slayer. And it's got a time travel battle. It's got this Captain America-like heroic antagonist. It's got star-crossed soulmates. It's got a cute dog. I feel like fans of Doctor Who and maybe Shadowhunters might enjoy it.
Excellent. All right. So in fact, that's one of the things that I want to leap into right away, which is that one of the things that I absolutely love is just the ambiguity, right, of the monsters, the monster slayers, within the monsters, like you know, it seems initially, right, like there are some good monsters and bad monsters, and actually then all the lines everywhere kind of get blurred in really delightful ways that make all the characters sort of people that you can both be and oh, right, you know. So talk a little bit about that. Where did some of that come from? Was that something you did consciously, or is it just, you know, deep in your heart that you like that ambiguity? Or
I feel like I definitely really wanted to blur those lines. I feel like it's really interesting to me when you can really understand both sides, and yet both sides are kind of unreconcilable, so that you kind of don't know whose side you're on. And what I find really interesting is it's actually the empathy of the reader that blurs that line, really, because the monsters are kind of evil. Like they in the book they steal, you know, time from the human lifespan to travel in time just for fun. They don't need to do it. They just do it. And in the book, there's a monster slayer, and I feel like we as human readers should be on his side. But it's our own empathy in following the monster narrator that blurs the line for us. And I always find that I thought that would be really interesting.
Right. And I mean, obviously, you know, that's kind of part of the complexity, right? That you're choosing this character who, on the other hand, doesn't actually get a choice necessarily about being a monster in this kind of.
No, I mean, she's definitely born into, I suppose she does make a choice, but I feel like it's a pretty, a difficult choice not to make, if that makes sense. I feel like most people might make this choice. So she decides to embrace these monstrous powers to actually steal human life after her family goes through something. I feel like I can spoil this. I feel like after her family is killed, I feel like most people might decide to go back in time and try to right that wrong. But yeah, she is still stealing life from, you know, innocent humans who had nothing to do with this killing. And yeah, I feel like it's a choice. I feel like she does make this choice.
Right. And, you know, so you can understand it, and at the same time, right, you have that interesting sort of tension, right, between that prevents you from fully embracing the narrator, and sort of keeps you in this sort of push and pull, right? You have that energy going through it.
Right.
And, you know, so actually you talked about going back in time. Let's talk about that. Talk about the time travel. You know, why, obviously that's a core part of the monstrous power, right? That they're moving around in time. What was like sort of the roots of that? Or you just did, you know, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I guess in terms of like why I chose to write time travel, before I started even writing the book, I had made this big list of everything I love the most. So I had written enemies to lovers, characters who seem really innocuous but then turn out to be really epic, like surprise. And at the end of it, I started making patterns, like what is it that I really, really love? Because I wanted to write a book that I would really enjoy writing, especially because I knew I would be writing it for a while. And one of the things on that was time travel. I'd noticed I liked a lot of books and movies that had time travel in them. So I thought, I guess I should include time travel in this book.
And why did you choose like the 90s? Why the 90s? Right? You know?
Yeah. I feel like partly it was because I wanted Joan, the main character, to be really out of her element. So 90s is before she was born. She goes back to 1993. And once she's there, she doesn't know anybody. She has no allies, no friends that have been born yet. And her dad is Chinese Malaysian, so he's back in Malaysia. There's nobody who can help her. All she has is this frenemy that she traveled back with, Aaron Oliver. And I really love it when characters are thrown together and kind of forced into proximity. So that was why I've sent them back sort of to the 90s, to when I guess, yeah, they had no allies. And I feel like the fashion would be really fun. So, yeah, that's why.
And so the other piece that I want to sort of rip off is you talked about a little bit how you developed the book, and because I know that you were working on it, right, for a really long time. Can you talk a little bit more about, so start with that first step, right? Your workshop, you were sort of mentally thinking about the book that you wanted to write, right?
Right. So I suppose, just had this list of things that I loved, like time travel, characters who turn out to be something else. And out of that, I started thinking, it also included, I guess, like character archetypes, character types. So I guess the characters came out of that as just, I guess, their base. And then I started thinking about things like, I had also had a premise kind of in parallel. So the premise itself, which is, as I say, this central rivalry between a monster and a monster slayer, had come out of, I guess, like when I was growing up, I really loved like those big blockbuster films where good guys and bad guys are really clearly demarcated. But when I was growing up, the heroes almost never looked like me, but the bad guys sometimes looked like me. So I would find sometimes the only Asian faces in the whole film would be just these guys that would show up just for a fight, and then the hero would kill them or beat them up, and they would just be lying there on the ground. And I've got this line in the book about, in movies, when the bad guys get killed, the camera moves away, it follows the hero. But in my viewing experience, I would find that I was really aware of these guys lying on the ground and thinking, what about them? Who's going to tell their family? So yeah, I guess I had the idea from that I was really interested in writing about one of those really good, decent, upright heroes that fighting against you rather than for you. So I guess I had the premise and I had my list, which is, I guess, where the world building and the characters started to get developed. And then I was kind of in a development stage. I was really thinking about the world and the characters for a couple of years, I think, before I even started writing any manuscript that ended up being in the book. It was really a lot of thinking time, a lot of talking with other people about the ideas of the world, how the world would work, the rules of time travel. I would say I had most of it in my head before I even put pen to paper in terms of the world, the characters, their backstories. But then it was like, how do I turn that into a story? How do I make this into a book? That was like a whole different challenge.
Right. So I guess, so that's the next. Did you write up, for instance, like a sheet about the characters, right? Did you sort of know their names? Did you know about their families? Like, how much of them did you have before you sort of dived into the story?
I had everything before I started writing manuscript, but it took me quite a long time to, I guess, develop these characters, to figure out what character dynamics would work together, especially in kind of, the book has kind of a found family, and I feel like you kind of need some kind of fun dynamics between these characters in a found family for it to be fun to write or fun to read. So I was really thinking about things like backstories. How would these characters interact, considering their backstories, considering, I guess, some things that haven't come out yet in book one. And I suppose those were all my considerations when I was developing these characters. But definitely at the beginning, I was like, I didn't know how to do anything. I was Googling, how do you write a plot? How do you make a character? What is a scene?
What are the answers? I'm like, sorry.
I really remember there was a point where I was like, what happens in Only a Monster? I don't know, it was like really, but genuinely, like, what's next? Oh no, I can't Google it. I have to make it up. I have to make it all
that's
up.
the worst. That's the worst part where you're like, oh, what happens next?
I have to make it up.
Right. So then once you did start writing the manuscript, did you write in a linear way? Were there specific scenes that you knew were going to be there and you wrote those first? Talk about that.
I had really had these milestone scenes in my mind, like often like a paradigm shift moment where everything you thought you knew has changed, or just really moments of high emotion between characters, or things that I just personally find really shiny, like when Joan travels in time for the first time. That was one of the first scenes I wrote because I love the idea of time travel. So I had written these, I guess I called them milestone scenes. And then I spent a lot of time with like index cards trying to figure out, well, how do I organize these scenes? Can I even fit all these scenes in this book, which I couldn't. So I had to also lose some of those index cards, sadly. Yeah. So yeah, I would say I did not write it linearly at first, but once I had those scenes and once I had figured out the order that they would go in, then I was writing fairly linearly. We had made this 300 word a day pact with my Clarion class, and it started on January 1st. And I think that was the thing that helped me the most, just to start writing the book from start to finish. Because 300 words a day doesn't sound that much, but it was like, because it's every day, you kind of really forced to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually talk about Clarion, because I know, you know, for those who don't know, Clarion is obviously this amazing writing workshop that a lot of, you know, it's specifically fantasy and science fiction, right? Yeah. And it's sort of for emerging voices in fantasy and science fiction. So, and I know you did that. How much of your manuscript did you have? Did you go to Clarion with manuscript, without? Where in the process did you go?
I was in the thinking about it stage still at Clarion, and I actually wrote a story in that universe, just trying to figure out, I guess, how how characters might interact with that world. I put a character who's fairly minor in book 1, spoiler, but kind of has a bigger role in book 2. I guess not a spoiler because no one will find that story. So I wrote a story about her. And so I guess I was really thinking about this world. I had the concept of the world already, and I had some of the characters, but I hadn't started putting a novel worth of story together yet. Yeah.
Right. And so what did you get out of Clarion the most? Like what kinds of things did you find there that sort of moved you along, in words, other than people who like harass you to like get into writing class, which is the single most valuable thing.
I can see some of them in the chat. I feel like that's what I got out of it the most. Only my amazing classmates. Hi, Lily and Eugene. I don't see anybody else in the chat, but yeah, I feel like so the idea of the workshop is you live in a student dorm for 6 weeks, which was already really exciting for me because it was like an American dorm from a TV show. Very exciting. It was like an American cafeteria. Oh, it's like being on TV. And so you're living with, I think it's 17 other people. And then each week you get a different really established fantasy or science fiction writer as your tutor. And they also live with you. So you're so immersed in among all these creative people. You have to write a story a week and you create 4 stories a day. So you're so immersed in ideas, in story, in narrative. And like, I guess you're starting to really think about the mechanics because you're critiquing every day so much. And then you're hearing other people do critiquing like really skillfully. So I feel like what I learned, I can't even grasp all the things that I learned from it. I feel like I learned so much from it. But yeah, I feel like the thing that I got out of it that I love the most is the friendships with the people who went there with me.
And so after that, you came out and you sort of got into the rhythm of writing the manuscript. And then how long was the total development process for the manuscript?
The actual manuscript, the 300 word a day pact started on January the 1st, 2016. It was like, it was the year after Clarion finished, I think. And so I guess it went all the way up to July 2019, which is when I finished. I guess that was when I had got the manuscript to a state where I was querying it. So was that 4 years? Yeah. So that was just writing though. So yeah, the development process took so much longer than that. I think a lot of that time was trying to figure out how to write a novel. I just didn't know how to do it. And it was such a steep learning curve. Like, I'm sure, you know, you've written so many, but that first one is like, how do you do this? And actually no one can tell you.
Right. It is a muscle. They're muscles, right? It's just like kind of lifting weights. You get good at doing it by doing it, and you learn how to do it by doing it. And there isn't actually another way, which kind of annoying. But yeah. And then, so how much once you had sort of gotten in manuscript, how do you feel like that made it fairly robust in a way? Like, or do you feel like, did you still do a lot of revisions afterwards?
I feel like a lot of my work was trying to figure out the most satisfying plot within the most satisfying structure. I ended up choosing the hero's journey because I guess because I've got this anti-hero Joan, and I wanted to put her on a kind of heroic adventure structure. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, I guess, the mechanics of the hero's journey. And that was also way harder than I thought it was going to be. It's quite a demanding structure when you start doing it. So I think that's where I think I spent a lot of time. The time I spent in development was maybe more even than I spent in actually rewriting, if that makes sense. I think the basic structure of the book, once I had it down, once I had figured it out, didn't change so much. I would say everything up to the inciting incident did change a lot, but everything after that did not.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see what other things, and let me keep an eye on the time. So actually talk about the cover for a second. Hold up the cover, because I actually have not gotten my physical copy yet. But I've been like, ooh, pretty.
It's amazing. So it's actually a Melbourne artist called Evian Tan. She has never done a cover before. This is her very first one. And isn't it amazing? Yes. Oh, Harper Teen found her on Instagram, I believe. And she had read the book. And so everything on the cover has a symbolic meaning that once you read the book, you can kind of understand. So yeah, I love this cover so much.
It's amazing. It's just, and it's sort of, you feel like you have, it captures, right, that kind of essence of the of the story, of that sort of, the ambiguity and the
mystery of that character.
Right. And that sort of, and it actually kind of almost evokes that sort of like the stealing of the lives, like, the red squirrel, right?
Yeah.
I sort of feel like I see them.
And I just really, I guess I love the way the title works with the girl. I don't know. I love everything about it.
Yes. And also just that idea, right? That idea of the monster still being human, right? The monster still being a person.
Right.
And the ways in which, obviously it's very nice and convenient to be able to sort of send people off and to stick something into a box that's called monster. But human beings are not that straightforward. And so, that's that sort of, that kind of back and forth. So now here's my next question, which is something that I would like to know, which is, when is the next book?
I don't think we have a publication date yet. I feel like even if we did, I would be worried about saying it, just because I know a lot of dates have been shifted because of the supply chain.
Are you working on it? I am
definitely working on it. It's an editorial at the moment. Yes, no. Okay, it's well into development. Yes.
Good.
Otherwise,
it's like, all right, when we were just talking about how the borders have just opened. Whoops. And how and be like, all right, getting on a plane, coming out there, knocking on the door. Right? Yeah. Where's the book? Where is it? Yes, good. So what would you say? Obviously it's hard to talk about the second book without, when you're without spoiling the first book. What do you feel about the writing of the second book? Did you find the writing of the second book easier, having written?
I found it much easier. Yeah, I had when I had that big development stage, I had actually thought I could fit way more of the story that I had come up with into book one. I had actually thought I could just write one book. But as I started writing one book, I was like, oh, no, I cannot fit a fraction of this story into this book. I could fit a third of this story into this book, in fact. So I had so many more things that I had wanted to include. I had more revelations. In my mind, I had imagined that the end point of this book might be the midpoint. But actually, when I went to write it, I was like, I don't think books work like this. No. So I already had at least the information that I wanted to reveal. I knew that for book two. And after that, I just feel like everything is so much easier for book two in terms of, I'm not Googling what is a scene anymore. So I've slightly leveled up there.
Right.
So yeah, I have found book two easier, and then there's new challenges because you're learning new things about how to write a sequel. But there were nothing like how do I write a book at all.
Right. And whoops, I lost my little page. What was the other one I wanted to ask? Oh, actually, this was one of the things that you actually tossed out, and I was like, I quite like the idea of how this intersected, how the process of being an educational editor, right, intersected with the book, right? Because editing and writing are two, obviously you want to edit as well when you're writing, and the kind of, I think the taste, right, the development of taste is one of those critical things for writing, but obviously then it's a very different mindset, right, when you have to generate.
Yeah, I actually got asked this at the Australian launch, like how does being an educational editor affect your writing? And I had really cavalierly said, not really. I guess I was like punctuating consistently. But then I was really thinking about it afterwards, and I think that there are things that I had learned from editing. Like, I think when you're doing educational editing in particular, you're really thinking about clarity of information. You're removing ambiguity. And that was extremely helpful when I was thinking about writing exposition and creating rules for a fantasy world. I think you want to convey them really as clearly as you can, and to remove ambiguity, at least in things that the reader actually has to understand how the world works. So yeah, I feel like my original answer that I didn't affect it that much. I think actually it really did help when I think about it. Yeah.
Did you find conversely that there was difficulty in sort of switching off the editor, right? Where
did I? Yes, because because when I had when I met with my Australian publisher, they said, "Did you get this edited?" And I feel like I had not relaxed as much as I had thought I had, and it was consistently capitalized and punctuated, probably more than it needed to be. I think I did find that more difficult to turn off than I would have expected. So I was probably thinking of consistency more than I would need to as an author. Having said that, when it got copy edited, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I missed.
Oh, copy edits, the best part.
I know, I love it. I've done copy
edits are actually, I like copy edits. I hate the galley stage. The galley stage is the worst, right? When they're like, read the whole thing, but you can't change anything. And I was just like, no. I just nope straight out of that. Like, no. If I'm not allowed to
do it, you just not read it.
Yes, no. So what is your favorite part of the process been? Right, not just like, is the writing the best part? Is the I think some people write to have finished writing. Right. And some people are just like, this is so much fun, I'll just generate words. And some people like the world building. Which piece of it is your favorite piece?
I feel like it's definitely the world building. I feel like I would not have spent so long in the development stage before writing, like a couple of years, I think, without, liking that stage the most. Otherwise, I think I would have started writing the book. But I feel like that is the most fun stage. You're still in creation. It's exactly as it is in your head still, because you're still making it up. And because once you put it down, that's when it's like, oh, this is not exactly as I'd had it in my head.
Right.
So yeah, it's still that perfect version when you're world building. It's only when it starts to go on the page that you start to think, oh, actually, that doesn't go with that. That doesn't actually make sense now that it's on the page. Now I have to fix it. Yeah.
Right. When it's no longer in that stage where your mind can contain the contradictions of the different parts.
Exactly.
Right. And let them coexist because you haven't actually had to make
your mind doesn't even know there are contradictions at that stage.
Right. Exactly.
But once it's on the page, it's clear.
Yes. I mean, so how do you resist? I've actually been experimenting a little bit with approaching, because I normally don't do world building at all. I do it as I go.
I know you kind of drop world building as you go. Yeah.
Right. And I figure it out as I do that. I don't know before I'm like, oh, this is a surprising new piece of this world I've written. But so I've actually been experimenting with doing it the other way, which is, for my next project, I'm sort of experimenting with some world building. But the problem is, it's like, I'm like, what's the habitable zone of planets? And how old can a star be? And so it's possible to like do world building a little too deeply.
I mean, I do feel like there's so much of this world that I at least didn't fit into book one. But in a way, I will say separately, I feel like whatever processes people have, I feel like you can't tell at the end. I feel like the end product of the book it still works either way. But for me, when I've got so much world building that I can't fit in the book, it gives me a feeling of, I guess, richness of the world, so that I feel like it's larger. I feel like it's kind of feels more real as I'm writing it, to know that there's things in this world that I could reach out and use, or I could just leave that. And it's also, that stuff that stuff I'm not using is still going to be consistent if I need to use it later in, say, book two, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Sorry. I'm like, all right. So we've passed that my mark. So I am going to jump into the questions that people have asked. If any of you have questions, please. Sorry.
I want to know what you're writing right now. Is it sci-fi? Amazing.
Oh, no, actually. Sorry. No, this is literally like, it's still, it might be sci-fi, but it's like literally, why isn't it should still, the planet should still make sense, right? The planet just, all right. So let's see, we talked a little bit about time travel, so I'm going to skip that a little bit. So the secret to writing a great love triangle.
Oh my goodness. I
think there's a way that I get to mark.
Okay, so
some way I would be able to mark this, but I don't think I can. By Belinda Grant.
Hi, Belinda. The secret to writing a good love triangle. That's really interesting. I feel like I didn't think of it as I'm going to set out to write a love triangle. I was more thinking, I've got this character who's half human and half monster, because I guess I'm really interested in those kinds of characters who move between worlds. Mm-hmm. So it seemed really natural to me to create these two guys who, much like sometimes feels torn within herself. These two guys, almost representative of that. It's like there's this human guy who's heroic. There's this monster guy, who's not necessarily heroic. And so that's how I had been thinking about it. I guess almost thematically, I hadn't really been thinking about, how do I set up a really good love triangle? It was almost more coming out of what things do I want to explore in this book, including that feeling of being torn with, within your own identity.
Right. Right. Well, and actually, I think that sounds to me like that is kind of the answer about what makes it an interesting and a compelling triangle, because triangles can sometimes be just like, but what makes it compelling is that there are the aspects within her, right, that do lead you to either direction, so that both pairings are quite plausible, right, and so. And you as the reader can sort of move in different directions with her, right?
Right. And I always love a character that could fall either way. They could fall to a bad side. They could fall to the good side. That, they have that capacity within them. I really like that kind of character.
All right, let's see. What others? This is a very interesting and specific one. Why the back of the neck, right? Oh. So this is not a huge spoiler. When the monsters steal time from people, they touch the back of their neck. Why there?
I did really think about it. I was thinking about things like vampires, like a very sensual part of the body and a very vulnerable part of the body, the back of the neck. I think there's a reason that vampires go for the neck. It's just, it's such a vulnerable part of your body. It's often an uncovered part of your body that is also vulnerable. I feel like most of the vulnerable parts of your body are all covered up. So I think that was what I was thinking about. I was thinking about vampires, and I guess vulnerability of humans when I chose the back of the neck. And also I kind of like the idea of, you're walking on the street, you kind of slightly think about it when after you've read the book.
Right. Yes. You're like, it's like somebody put somebody on the back of my neck. Yes. And so this is sort of a broad question. But I think it kind of intersects interestingly with what you were talking about how you were sort of listing the things that you really liked, from Marissa. With the amount of fantasy that's out there, how do you make your world feel different and unique? And right, especially, and obviously that is the sort of thing where when you're talking about writing down the list of the tropes that you love, that is often I would agree, like that's something that I often find myself thinking about and doing myself, right? Having that conversation with things that I already love, within the genre, sometimes outside the genre. So sorry, let me set you free. Talk about this. What do you feel like, makes it?
No, I agree. I feel like I was going down the same train of thought. I feel like I guess I don't always need something to be super original. I can like things that are really, on a familiar path. But certainly for me, I feel like I was really looking inwards, like what do I like the most? I guess with, some hope that if I like it a lot, maybe other people might like it a lot. But if they don't, at least I really enjoy writing it. So I think when you're really looking deep in yourself, what do I really like? And then I feel like everyone likes like a different array of things. So if I like time travel and star-crossed lovers and characters who seem innocuous but turn out to be amazing, or and characters who have like a mysterious backstory. I think once you put all these things together, even though they're familiar tropes or familiar things that you like, once they're in a configuration, I think that becomes original potentially. So I guess that's how I came up with the time traveling monsters. I guess that's an original kind of monster, but it was coming out of something, that premise that interested me, and then plus like kind of world building that interests me. So I think that's potentially the road to originality.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's right. The internal, right? What makes it original is you, and so that focus on your own hunger, right? The story that you want yourself. I really love something like Umbrella Academy. It's like you can just tell this is one mind. It's so idiosyncratic. There's a monkey butler, there's a guy on the moon, there's time travel. I feel like these are things where maybe he went down the same road. These are things that I just really like, and I'm just going to put them all together. Right. let's see. And actually, so you talked about so what else was on your list? So Jessica's asking, what are your favorite YA tropes? And so here's my question to sort of hop off that. What are some tropes that you love that didn't end up in this book? That might be another book, the next series.
I guess I'll start with Jessica. I feel like the tropes of YA that I really love often I find like initially a protagonist who's initially, I would say, not powerful, getting some agency, becoming powerful. I feel like that is one of the things that I really enjoy about YA. A character who starts out fairly low sometimes. I guess I'm really thinking about YA fantasy and science fiction at the moment rather than contemporary. But then they start to become empowered. They start to get agency. They often separate from their family for the adventure, whatever that is. So I would say, I don't know if that is a trope of YA, but that is one of the things that I love about YA. And then what was your follow-up? I can't remember.
Just my follow-up. Oh, sorry, but first I want to like sort of jump back to that, which is also one of the things that I was sort of thinking about in terms of YA. That is one of the things that I think that makes YA so compelling, right? That precisely that journey, right? That journey of becoming, the journey of acquiring some kind of agency towards a goal is one of the things that I think makes YA really appealing to us even later on in life, because it's the same process, right? We're always still hoping to become. We're all right. We're still hoping to gain agency ourselves always throughout our lives.
Completely agree.
But that moment in that YA moment, the moment of transition is sort of like the single biggest, right? And so it becomes sort of, it stands in.
Yes. Agreed.
And sorry. So my question was, what are some YA tropes that you love that did not, what was on your list? On your list of the things you love that did not make it into
I would say I love a heist. I love like con artists. I feel like I slightly put them in this book. But yeah, like the full heist is not in this book. And so I would love to write that at some point. I love con artists and heists.
Let's see, what are these? Oh, sorry. So Hannah Baker asks, can you talk about the Easter eggs on the cover and point them out?
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh. Some of them are spoilers for like the very end of the book, the epilogue of the book. So
all right. Point to them and say, this is a spoiler for the end of the book. And then, yeah.
This is a spoiler, this fire in the... is a spoiler for the end of the book. But I can talk about this. This is a sigil that is used by monsters to indicate a monster place. So it's a serpent engulfing a sailing ship. And then I think I cannot say anything else because of spoilers. This is one of the important settings of the book. It's this historical house / museum called Holland House, and that is where Joan meets Nick, the monster slayer. But yes, everything else on here is a spoiler.
All right, and so here's somebody, Bianco is asking, do you have the other 2 books already written out, or do you have a plan where you know what major events will happen and how the trilogy will end?
I do not know how the trilogy will end exactly, but I definitely have a good idea, I would say, rather than no. I feel like because I had done all that development work, I know all of the reveals to come, if that makes sense. So I know the information that will still come out, a few more paradigm shifts that will make you go, wait, everything is not as it seemed. So I think I would say those are the things that I know and that are helping me to structure the next books. Because I think for the first one, as well as using that hero's journey structure, I was really using a structure of revelation. So I knew that there were pieces of information that I wanted revealed throughout the book. And so I structured the book using that as a kind of overlaying the hero's journey. And I guess that's the case also with the next books.
Right. So you have like beats, but you don't have the final, you don't know your ending scene.
I have a good idea. I would say I'm like 99% sure, but you know how sometimes once you put it on the page, it's just not right. So I would say I have the thing in my head where it's like I hold something that might hold contradictions. I think I know, but once I put it on the page, I suppose something could change. Who knows?
Let's see. Sarah asks, what 3 authors or books have inspired your writing the most?
Wow, what books have inspired my writing? Maybe unintuitively, I feel like maybe Game of Thrones has really inspired me. I feel like what George R.R. Martin was doing with kind of harnessing the hero's journey to do that big plot twist with Ned's death was really interesting to me. I really liked the idea of, harnessing structure, a familiar structure that you think, so that you really think you know what's going to happen next because you kind of internally just know that structure. That was really inspiring to me, that idea that you could play with people's expectations of what comes next, just from their own familiarity with tropes, with structure, with arcs, and then sometimes do something a little bit different that hopefully still feels satisfying. So yeah, I found it very inspirational.
Right. In fact,
I feel like you are very inspirational. I mean, I love your books. And I feel like just that I don't know if it feels this way for you internally, but from the outside, it looks like you have a very free-flowing writing process where, well, it seems that way, where you're like, I'm going to write this, and then you just go and write this. Whereas sometimes I feel like I wish I could be more like that.
I feel like every so often for me, it always is that the first character kind of starts talking or doing things, and kind of leads me into the world that way, increasingly. But actually, so you're
back to in a situation, and then you can just keep going. Is that?
Yeah, it's sort of like, I know, because it accretes, right? It's sort of, that's kind of the process that's happening. And then obviously what that involves is I go back and revise very heavily, because what's happening is I'm constantly putting in things that I don't know if it's going to bear fruit. And if a branch does not bear fruit, then I go back and prune it afterwards. And that's the way that I leave myself stuff to work with later, that maybe doesn't actually get used. But in fact, so just to sort of say, one of the things I was talking about Game of Thrones with somebody, about A Song of Ice and Fire specifically, and how in the book it is a much more surprising moment, right? Where in the show it's surprising still, but the show has already established, this sort of the brutality of this universe, and because there are multiple points of view and places. But in the book, I still remember the first time reading that scene of being like,
that can't be, because that's not the structure.
Because it's so clear. It's so clear in the book up until that point that, this is your character. This is the person you're going to be with. And then it's like, nope. And obviously, I do think that it's important, right, to balance that, in that, when you're playing with reader expectation at the one hand, and what in some ways I feel like the show and the books slightly fall off the rails a little bit, is that at the same time, readers have expectations sometimes for a reason, right? You want to satisfy, you don't want to be like, aha, gotcha every time, right? There's right.
That, it's like you got to, the twist has to be something almost more satisfying, almost more like, oh, I'm really excited to go down that path instead. Right. If I feel like that is really true, you can't set up an expectation and then surprise, this is worse. It has to be something equally as fun, or I guess something that shows a new path.
Right. Right. And there has to be a balance. I do feel like, that's one of those pieces where you really want to have a mix of, giving the reader, as a reader, I want narrative satisfaction. I want to be satisfied, right? I don't want to just be like, oh, I'm an idiot for caring about any of these people because, right. And sort of, sorry, where you're like, I don't actually, this is not the character that you've sold to me, right? As opposed to, oh, this is a thing that can happen in this universe, and now you have expanded the range of possibilities of this story in a way that feels kind of true, right? Which is what the first one does.
Right. It's almost like you're almost setting up two arcs at the same time, so that when this arc is, subverted, you have to know that this arc had already been started. So it's not
right.
It feels inevitable still. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You can go back afterwards and be like, oh, I can see you were moving towards this all along. Right.
Yes.
And yeah, exactly. Let's see what else. Another question from Bianca. Aaron was my favorite character. He was definitely not what I expected. Did you have a favorite character or animal to write about in this book?
I have to say Ruth. I feel like I know she's kind of a side character, but she was so much fun to write. I think she really, I don't know. I feel like her dialogue could be anything sometimes. So she would just really brighten up a scene. I was always really happy when Ruth was in the scene because I feel like her dialogue was really fun.
Yes, when the character's voice really comes alive in your head, and those characters always make you happy, right? When they come. Yes. And it just sort of it creates that zing, right?
Yes, they have some energy in the scene, and they kind of provoke things from other characters. That was really fun sometimes.
Yes. Let's see. Hannah asks, who is the hardest character to watch? I'm guessing to write. And she says, I love this book so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I would say probably Joan herself. I was still learning how to write a book as I was creating Joan. And because she was the main character and the eyes through which you saw the book, she was the one who, I guess, held all of the difficult things as I was writing it. So I was really learning as well to even do things like character development over such a long length of story. Before that, I think the longest thing I'd ever written was maybe 20,000 words. And I don't think there was that much character development in that. So it was just something new that I had to learn to do. And I think, you can't hide anywhere with the narrator, with the main character. The side characters, you can kind of sometimes sketch things out or hint at at things that are going on in their heads. But when you're in that character's head, that is hard sometimes. You can't hide.
Right. And you have to have a really clear sense of that character.
Yes.
And obviously that's, that gets you both things, right? Being so closely bound in that character lets you get the reader's empathy, right? Because you've put them inside our head and we can feel their feelings.
Completely. And then I guess you get that tricky thing where you're like, oh, now I've written enough of this character that I just know she would not do this.
Right.
How does this happen now?
Right. Well, and actually that's the thing is when that happens, I always think, that's the sort of thing where that's an opportunity to me, right? That's a moment at where you have to go with the character, right? When oh, they just wouldn't do this. And you either have to be like, well, so how does this happen? Or this can't happen. Something else has to happen. And right. when you have enough energy in a book that you are driven off where you think you are going, that when you're driven into finding another answer, I generally think that that's where things are really kind of cooking, right?
I agree. Yeah.
Right. And let's see. Another question is from Lynn. Aside from this trilogy, do you have anything else that you're working on or have plans for that you can tell us about?
I do. I feel like I have an idea for another book that every now and then I just like sneak back into that file and just do a little bit of work on it. Because I guess because it came out of that list of things I like, those things are always also really shiny to me. So yeah, sometimes when I get stuck, or sometimes, you know, when I just want to go into that file, I do work on something else. I won't say too much about it. Who knows what will happen with it? But yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about it too now. Yay, good. And let's see. And I think we've talked a lot about writing process, but Susie Davis asks, how long have you been writing as well?
Oh my goodness, how long have I been writing?
Like when? When did we met in Stargate Atlantis fandom?
20 years ago. I don't know.
God.
I don't know. I think I've been writing, you know, I feel like I don't remember ever not being able to write. I remember the stories I wrote, you know, when I was, I don't know what it is in America, but like in prep, in grade 1 and grade 2. I still remember those stories, even the process of making those stories. So I feel like there must be something innate in me that loves to write, I suppose, I don't forever in my head at least.
Right. Maybe, do you know, when was the first time that you shared a piece of your writing, like more publicly or yeah?
I guess that would have been fan fiction, right? It's like that was the first forum where you're putting something out to people who don't have to read it if they don't want to. It's like, it's not a teacher, it's not your mom. These people, they can choose to read it or not read it.
Right. And
there's a lot to be learned from that as well. It's like,
and actually, and that's one of the things that I love about it, right? And I feel like that's so helpful. That was so helpful for me, at least, is the sense of there are people who want to read, right? It's not like it's a different vibe than a writing workshop, right? It is people who really are just like, many of whom do not want to write themselves; they just want to read. And if it's like, I don't like this, then they're not going to read it. And that is, yes. Are we out of time? We're out of time.
I'm sorry to be the buzzkill here. I wanted to go on more because there's wonderful questions still in there, but you went on for a great while and such a wonderful chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for putting those questions. Vanessa, Naomi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is so wonderful. Congratulations again, Vanessa. I'm so excited to get to read this and enjoy it as much as I have.
I do have one last question, though. Where can people find you, Vanessa, on social media?
Oh, I have to. Oh my gosh. I feel like I should just know that, right? And Vanessa_writes on Twitter.
Oh.
You should put it in the chat. You should type it in the chat. That's always
yes, that's great.
Yeah. I like this is now not interesting. You should say something interesting, maybe.
Yes.
And are you only on Instagram or are you on
I'm also on Twitter, but I feel like I'm most active on Instagram, so I'll give you my Instagram handle.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hi everybody, I've been seeing the chat. I've seen you all. Hi.
How about you, Naomi? Where can people follow you?
Oh, I'm basically there we go. I'm at Naomi Novik on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. I mean, are we doing Facebook still? Is Facebook still?
Who knows?
I think I'm also on YouTube. Same thing. I'm just stuck with that name.
Perfect. And speaking of YouTube, for anyone who came in late or just came in at the tail end, you can rewatch this event either here on Crowdcast or we'll also upload it to our YouTube channel. You can just YouTube Mysterious Galaxy, and you'll find us very soon at the top. And we'll have 2 years worth of virtual events for you to look at too.
Wow, awesome.
And if you haven't yet,
for any of you who are ever in the area, Mysterious Galaxy is an amazing bookstore, and you should go.
It's amazing.
And you're also
I like to agree as well.
Online as well.
And don't forget, if you haven't yet, you can still get your own copy of Only a Monster here at the store, and eventually get a signed book plate from Vanessa. Without further ado, I'm going to bid everyone a good night. Thank you again, Vanessa. Thank you again, Naomi.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone out there. Bye.
Thank you.